What YouTube channel? What YouTube channel? From the faculty, she's lead presentation from live transmission system.
As far as how long you're there? Exactly. So it's like you get introduced in here and then you just like, yeah. Too long. And then they came in. Yes, exactly. Important. I know, that's what I was thinking. But also, that's all I think I'm saying. Tomorrow. Actually, I have another little conference right after all of this. Oh, it's been a lot. Yeah. And again, I'm not surprised by anything. Yeah. Being in the United States. Yeah. You got it. Yeah. Like, I mean, there's obviously it's also 10 right, exactly. Yes. And in Toronto. That's it. Yeah. There's a point where it's exactly. Especially this emphasis on having a Michigan where you have people justification other than that. Exactly. And for she's giving us a lot.
No, no, it's fine. Hold on. You need
Wait, that's so sorry. Was that going to be weird? The artist. I have no idea. Should they go in the middle? Yeah. That's good. Oh, yeah, I'm not looking around, I'm looking. All right, say international partnership for Brazilian. Can I clear it before you like, you need my signature? No. Okay. Life with aces.
We need to get the perfect picture first.
Okay, did like 5.
He's efficient.
Is the one taller?
Oh, that's a good, that was really cute. Yeah. Pretty good.
Yes, absolutely.
Sí. Bueno, después de este breve receso, you have to put o ya aprendieron español, ¿no?
And I didn't get mine.
¿Sí se escucha la traducción? Bueno, después de este breve receso, retomamos el trabajo de este Symposium y vamos a continuar con la presentación de la doctora Lauren
McEnroy.
Okay. Ella es presidenta de la Red Regional de Canadá. Es profesora asistente en la Facultad de Trabajo Social de la Universidad Estatal de Ohio, de Columbus, Ohio. Su investigación se centra en niños, adolescentes y adultos jóvenes vulnerables, en particular en las poblaciones LGBTQ+. Sus intereses de investigación incluyen las implicaciones del compromiso con las tecnologías de la información y la comunicación para el desarrollo de la identidad, el apoyo social y el compromiso de la comunidad, la salud y la resiliencia. Bienvenida, Laura.
Thanks very much, Juan Carlos. So thank you for sticking with us today, everyone. I'm the third act. I don't know if that's a selling point or not. As was mentioned, my name is Dr. Lauren McEnroy. I'm currently an assistant professor in the College of Social Work at The Ohio State University. And I'm here today to talk a little bit about the methods and ethical implications of engaging in different kinds of scholarship and research using digital technologies. And then, of course, particularly to LGBTQ young people. So I'm going to sort of, the presentation is sort of ordered through the research process. So I'm going to start by talking about recruitment mechanisms, particularly ones that have tended to work in my experience with LGBTQ young people and young people generally. So a lot of what I'm going to be talking about, the examples I'm going to be giving are from Project Query, which was Dr. Craig's project that led directly to INQUY, was the previous project that this current partnership builds upon. And I was at that point a doctoral candidate and the research coordinator on that project. So I'll be talking about the study. So it was a study of about 6,300 young people from across the US and Canada. So in terms of how we got that sample of 6,300, we did a sort of multi-pronged online recruitment process. So online outreach to agencies serving LGBTQ young people in every single state, province, and Canadian territory. So we literally generated a giant Excel list with a page per state or province of all the agencies we thought were either LGBTQ youth specific or offered programming for the population, and we did email, and I'll show you some of what we sent out to them. We also did online outreach to LGBTQ groups on social media, so Facebook groups, Instagram communities, Tumblr groups, Reddit subreddits, as was actually very effective as well. So that was just us reaching out to the groups and asking them, the moderators or whoever was in control of the group, to share, or if we could share. We also did paid advertising, similar to what they're doing with QueerView right now, which we spoke about this morning, on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And finally, we also did some dissemination as well through our community partners and our various professional networks to other scholars we knew who were working in this area. So I'm going to show you some of the media that we used, particularly these three things, as well as some others. So first off, we had a website, right? In my attempt at that point, I was really learning how to do like website building and animation. I have gotten slightly better, but I still think it looks good. So what you really want for your online study is a hub, right? You want a hub that you can filter people into, that you can have all of your materials. So what the study's about, we had the ethics approval up. You can see it's a little small, but like publications, media, Shelley's other projects were linked to. So you want like a central space where you can sort of hub all of your study-related stuff so that you're directing people in. So we actually didn't link directly to the survey from the social media ads. It took them to a page on the query site where then they entered the survey. This is also the interactive poster. So it's a clickable, I think ACES was talking about, right? Clickable PDFs. So it was a clickable PDF poster, and this is what we sent out primarily to the agencies. So it was sent to over 950 organizations and groups via email. This was the poster, so they could also print it out, right? It had the actual link on it, but they were also able to send it so youth could actually click to enter the survey from the poster. We did a lot, and not just with the email, but also with the paid ads, which I'll talk about in a minute, around focused outreach to less populous states and territories, because we know a lot of the research on LGBTQ young people is clinical, right? They come from community-based samples or clinical samples. So what's really unique about what we did was the fact that we have young people from every single state and province, and at least, I think the minimum I set for my own goal was like 5 people, at least 5 youth from each state and province. So we have a much, a non-clinical, quite geographically diverse sample is what we ended up with. So we also, as is now being used in Snapshot and in QueerView, did a YouTube commercial. So we did a little 1-minute, basically audio-visual version of the ad, just trying to, and posting it on Facebook and trying to get young people interested in clicking and taking the survey. We also did, as I mentioned, that direct messaging to groups. So we had 75 Facebook groups we mentioned. We also put it on a dozen to half a dozen Reddit subreddits. So we were just contacting communities like mad. And then, as I mentioned, these were the 3 platforms where we did paid online ads. These are examples of what the ads can look like. So you might see these are 2 different ads, and you can, it's probably too small for you all to see from back there, but over 25,000 individuals saw each of these ads, and you can see some of the comments from people below. They're tagging. If they see it, they like taking it, they would tag a friend. There's one youth here who says, "That was an amazing survey, please excuse my voice in the video recordings." Another one says, "That's an awesome survey, whoop, I actually had fun answering those questions." So youth were really enjoying the process of taking the survey because we tried to make it as appealing and as sort of accessible and relevant to them. So these are what they look like, and we would just boost a bunch of ads. We also tried to tie it. So for example, the survey was open during Pride Month. So we did a Pride Month push, and just sort of, and then did some specific pushes to specific states where we were still low on numbers. So quite sort of strategically building out the sample. There are a lot of recruitment challenges. We didn't suffer too much from this because we collected data a couple of years ago, but bots and false respondents are becoming more and more of a challenge in online research to detect them. So I'm working on some strategies around that. What I would say the most common advice, right, is that was me. Sorry, that was totally me. I apologize. One of the most sort of common recommendations is, first of all, use the features that your survey platform offers. So Qualtrics has CAPTCHAs or the other anti-bot features that enable them. That's the first thing you should do. Second thing is what can be really effective is asking the same question in different ways in different parts of the survey. So the traditional one is like asking youth their age. in one place and their year of birth somewhere else, and if those two don't line up. I will say that the false respondents are getting better at answering those questions. So the more you can kind of make it subtler or more challenging, so you can see whether it's consistent enough, but they may not realize that's what you're doing, it can be very effective. The other thing that people say is to do open-ended qualitative answers, right? So that you can read and see it's a real person. Unfortunately, the bots are getting better at that too. So what you do, it's about the kind of question you ask. It needs to be a required question that is quite complex, so that it can't just be answered yes, no, or with like a 5-word answer, because the bots are getting better at interpreting questions and answering them. So there's lots of things you can build in. I'm happy to talk to folks after, and I'm testing some new mechanisms. I'm not sure if they'll work yet. We will see through one of online negativity, which I'm going to be, which Rachel was talking about this morning, and that I will be talking about a little bit later. But what's important about it is also putting into perspective is the fact that, yes, inevitably you're going to have false respondents, right? And you may not catch them all in data cleaning, but the idea of having a large diverse sample, which is and different kinds of samples than can be accessed in offline research, has a lot of value, even if 1 or 2 out of 100 slips through, right? And often the bots don't even answer the questions. So they get caught by that, right? They only answer the required questions, so you know to pull them out. So just some tips around designing ads, and all of the sub-studies of INQUY are great examples of this. Is you want something that's very relevant to young people, right? It's appealing to young people. They see themselves reflected, and they understand in viewing an image that it belongs to them, right? That they are part of the population that you are trying to access. The other thing, so you can do 2 different things, where you can do just a very visual image and then put the text below, or incorporate those 2 together. But either way, the text itself should also be very clear, very straightforward. They should know like this if they qualify or not. So what can be really helpful with that and branding is community consultation, right? This is what youth advisory boards are great for. This is what younger students are really helpful with, right? Is saying yay, nay, that I would click on that, I wouldn't. This isn't clear to me, all of that, right? So when you're thinking about branding and studies is becoming more and more important, and you do want consistent branding across your study, and to have that be something that young people are actually attracted to. So that's just a little bit about recruitment, and I'm going to move into ethical implications of online research, which is a big topic, but I'm going to do my best in the time I've got. Just to set a little bit of context or like definition for some of the words I'm going to be using, when I talk about informed consent, it's the idea of fully apprising participants of both their rights as a participant as well as their responsibilities, and additionally informing them about what the study in detail is actually about, right? The specific purpose, why are you asking these questions, the methods you'll be using, the risks to them, but also the potential benefits to them. So fully informing a research participant so that they can make an informed decision about whether or not they would like to participate. When I use the term informed assent, that's the explicit agreement of a minor to participate. So the definition of minor varies, but in Canada and the US and a lot of other countries, it's 18. So informed assent is all the same things as informed consent, but it's the minor participant agreeing to participate. So traditionally with informed assent, you also ask for the parent guardian's permission for a young person to participate. But what's really interesting in online research is it offers a really great opportunity to solicit independent assent. So that is that a young person can assent to participate, can agree to participate in a study without the parent or guardian consenting as well. So the youth makes an independent decision. So with LGBTQ youth, particularly in online research, asking for parental consent can actually put the young person at much higher risk than if you were just were allowing them to participate independently, right? So you lose the anonymity, that benefit of online research, because it makes the young person much more identifiable. You can also put them at risk of potentially like an unsupportive parent, right? Having to go to an unsupportive parent to ask for permission to participate in an LGBTQ study, and or you're going to lose the youth who you may really want to hear from because they are less likely, again, to be accessing community services probably, right? Because of the barriers of potentially an unsupportive family, for example. So the idea behind independent assent of minors is that the institutional review board acts in place of the parental consent process, right? So they are determining that your research is not putting these young people at inappropriate risk. So that's what's so valuable about the IRB process with doing online research with young people. The other thing we did in INQUY, and again is being, I believe, used in some of the other regional projects at the moment, is because we know young people don't read consent forms, right? They don't. You give them a sheet of paper, they're not going to read it. Is that in addition to giving them that written consent material that we traditionally would in an online survey, we also took the most salient aspects of the consent form and turned it into a brief 3-minute animated video. So this character explained the risks and benefits, the rights and responsibilities to the youth. So actually, we did ask a question about this. So we said, did you look at the video? And the vast majority, I want to say over 90% of youth did. And in addition to reviewing the textual consent materials. And then we asked, did you find it helpful basically in understanding what you signed up for, right? Did it help you better understand what you were consenting to? And again, overwhelmingly, young people said yes. This really helped them. It also addresses divergent learning styles and all of that. I should note with our audio video around accessibility, so all of the videos had transcripts attached to them. They were all on YouTube, and so they all had transcripts to make sure that they were accessible. The other thing to think about, particularly with surveys and online research generally, is so transcripts are important for those who may be hard of hearing, but also you want to make sure as much as possible your surveys are compatible with screen readers for participants who may be partially sighted or blind. So there's also a lot around accessibility you have to think about. The other thing we did was run the entire survey, but particularly the consent form, through a readability test tool, which essentially basically grades the words, right? So it tells you what the grade level a person would have to understand the material you're putting through the test tool. So, for example, the consent form, it was set well below the grade level of the youngest participants, who were 14, right? So we made sure we were at least, I think it was 2 grade levels below that, to make sure that they could really we used simple words, right? We didn't use the big fancy research words. The consent form was written to be comprehensible to young people. The other thing you have to think about when it comes to ethics, in addition to consent, is the fact that you're often asking about really challenging questions, right? The query survey asked about mental health. My ON survey is also asking about health and microaggressions and discrimination online. So you do want to build in opportunities for youth to feel supported. So traditionally what's done in online surveys is there might be something like this at the very end of the survey. I personally don't think that's sufficient in a lot of cases, particularly if you're asking about asking challenging questions. So INQUY, and then I've continued to do this in my subsequent work, is we would put these materials near sensitive questions. So as soon as they answer questions around, for example, depression, suicidality, violence and victimization, at the end of that page, or even directly after that question, we would offer them the option to, we would essentially ask a question like, do you think you need help right now? If so, we recommend you stop the survey and you go to these, and we would do our best to provide 24-hour services that they could access, either by phone or text. So that's another way where you're building in, right, that ethical implication of the fact that you can't control the environment. The other big thing to think about around ethics, and I don't have time to go into this in too much depth, is confidentiality and data security, particularly around data collection processes, data storage processes, rights and responsibilities, and access. So again, this could be its own hour-long thing, but just to hold that in mind, that you really do have to be thoughtful. These are people are contributing to your work, and you really want to make sure that you're respecting that and protecting their privacy and confidentiality. So into sort of data collection approaches, I'm going to talk about surveys first. So you need to pick your platform, right? In the case of both my work at Ohio State as well as at Toronto, we use Qualtrics, but there are definitely other great platforms that are available. But you do need to pick your platform, and you need to pick a platform thoughtfully based off what you actually want to do, the kinds of questions you want to ask, and the kinds of basically like systems, survey systems that you need in place or you need available to you to be able to move people through the data collection experience the way you want. So all platforms are not created equal. Some are better at one thing or another. So it really depends on what your project is and whether the platform meets your needs for that. The other thing I really recommend, particularly for young people to keep them engaged, is the idea of gamifying, right? So making the survey more than just answering lists and lists of boring questions, right? Like make it fun, add images, make it a game, make it like, we did INQUY a little bit, like points for questions, make it visual and interactive as much as you can, while still thinking about that accessibility piece. Because unfortunately some of the best or most fun questions in Qualtrics technically aren't accessible. So some of you may actually not be able to use them because your schools have prevented you, if you're in the US, so like for Ohio State, there's certain questions that are really fun that I can't use because they're not accessible. But as much as you can, make it engaging, make it youth friendly. And again, here's where your youth advisory board can be very, very helpful in telling you like, this is fun, this is boring, this is too long, I don't understand this, like, and helping you sort of strategize around what's possible. Well, I already did accessibility. So this is actually a image that we're using in the ON study where we're having youth look at the image and respond to it. But because it's an image, again, it's not screen reader compatible. So we added an image caption, right? So that any any young person who was going to answer a question, this question, they wouldn't be able to answer it unless you added a screen caption, right? If the student was using a screen reader. So you need to think about things like that. So that's sort of quantitative surveys real quick and some of the things you can do. With qualitative research, as was spoken about earlier by the Canadian Regional Network, they're using WeTransfer, I believe, to transfer the images, right, that are being used in the photo elicitation. For Project Query, we gave the youth the option to film themselves on video and respond to a question, either filming themselves or we let them film their pet or whatever they wanted, and then they submitted that video to us through WeTransfer, because Qualtrics, if you want to submit more than like a one-page Word document, it costs a fortune to do uploads in Qualtrics, and WeTransfer has a really great encryption. So you can definitely ask youth to submit images, to submit videos, to submit, Dr. Austin was talking about art space, right, like art they've done, whatever, any kind of like digital materials, you can definitely get them to submit. As was also talked about in what the regional networks are doing is online interviews are really great, right? So we're using Zoom. Again, there are multiple platforms. Most of the online conferencing, video conferencing software now you can just record within the software and download those files. There's a lot of opportunities. Zoom and other platforms also have whiteboards that you can share your screen with participants. There's all sorts of things different features you can use to help you engage young people. Also, there's LGBTQ youth are online and they're creating lots and lots of content. Sorry, folks. Lots and lots of content. So secondary content analysis, both quantitative and qualitative data. So this is the Babadook has been like taken up by queer community. Some folks are nodding. Being taken up by queer community is like a queer icon. So like these are off Tumblr. So you can definitely collect data, collect images, all publicly available. Twitter's are great, and there's lots of software now where it can scrape, what's called scraping, or pull data down for you that then you can then put into Atlas or in Vivo and analyze. So there's a lot of software now, if you don't know how to write Python, right, code, that you can use to do that for you. There's also lots you can do, right, around program development and evaluation, and Dr. Martin's intervention is an excellent example of this, right? Either online interventions that are sort of directed by, on a week-by-week basis by a either practitioner or researcher. You can also definitely do self-directed interventions that are just like you set them up and there are modules and people do them at their own pace, right, rather than one where there's more structure to the group. There's tons of options of how you can do entirely online interventions or hybrid interventions as well. If you think about hybrid online, offline learning like we use in the classroom, you can also use that for intervention. So there's lots of opportunities to sort of think about how to integrate technology into that process. And so mostly lastly, around knowledge, the idea of knowledge mobilization or knowledge translation, right? We're taking all of this knowledge from these communities, these youth communities online. We also need to be returning that knowledge back to them, right? So once data has been collected and you've synthesized and analyzed it, returning those results to the community members you provided it to. And because of the online nature, you can ask them to follow your social media participants at the end of the survey, and then they can sign up to sort of hear from you once you have the data available. So this is just one section of one of Dr. Craig's infographics. I couldn't fit the whole thing in without it being totally invisible. So this is like one little section of the infographic, but it also demonstrates that you can do a full long infographic, but you can also pull that infographic apart and suddenly it's 10 social media posts. So it's one infographic, but each little section could be its own social media post where you're reporting data through social media back to practitioners and youth. The other really great thing that some research is starting to do is the idea of like digital campaigning from your results, right? So if you intend for your results to be tied into advocacy work or into new programming, or this is a health prevention intervention, it's an HIV prevention, specifically created for Black MSM. So you can, and it's originally from a research project, right? And from what they found, they're now doing an advocacy campaign, a health promotion campaign. So there's all kinds of really interesting ways you can then leverage your research activities on social media and make change that way. As all of us social workers and the related disciplines, that's really an impetus for us, right? That the research has a purpose and technology can be really, really helpful for doing that. So that's it for me formally, and I'm happy to answer questions. Oh no.
Por motivos de tiempo, solo tenemos espacio para una pregunta. Just one question.
I
don't need it for Jeremy, but I got it.
Lauren, thank you. That was like awesome, and you covered a ton of ground. Talking about ethics is a really challenging topic, and you've covered a ton of stuff. So first, thank you. My first question is why oh no?
It's on.
Oh.
On. It stands for online negativity.
Oh,
it's
yeah.
ON. Yeah.
Okay.
Not.
Okay.
There shouldn't be an OH in front of it.
Okay, so I have like a couple of questions that are sort of like kind of came up for me, if it's okay. So
Yeah.
The first is, so I'm the new incoming chair of our social behavioral IRB at USC now.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm sort of taking on some responsibility in terms of thinking through ethics and of course coming with my own lens of doing this kind of work, right? And one of the things I wanted to just ask your thoughts on is around parental consent. And so I have personally in my own work taken the approach of this could be a dangerous thing getting consent, therefore we will just look to waive consent, right? And I got some feedback from another IRB chair said, if it's not dangerous though, you should get consent. So I'm just curious if you've had any experience or thinking at all about like how we might assess for whether it is problematic and then allow a waiver of consent when it is a problem.
Right.
But also like if a kid's like, yeah, my parents are supportive, be like, okay, well then the process really should be to consent. So it's just curious if you've thought, I hadn't thought about that before. Yeah. So I was just curious if you had.
A little bit. I think you make a very good point, right? Around have we swung too far in the direction of informed assent, right? And just assuming that because LGBTQ youth are LGBTQ youth that it does put them at risk. I would say that's the part where, at least at Ohio State, I've had a lot of success with sort of working with the ethics board, right? They are supportive of waivers for LGBTQ youth when necessary, but thinking about like that, I think it's great you're on the IRB because I think that is what the IRB should do, right? Particularly when it comes to waivers, is take them seriously and think through like what does this risk actually mean? What are the opportunities, and asking those who are applying for ethics approval to really clearly like think through this process. I think that's super important. And I actually did have an IRB do that to me and say like, we generally agree with you, but we want you to like justify it, elaborate upon it, make it clear, and did ask us, for example, to make some changes. So for example, the idea, often we put the consent form first, right? Before we actually know whether the participant meets the inclusion criteria. So I've now been asked to put the inclusion criteria in the consent form so they are pushed out before they ever agree to be a participant if they don't meet the criteria, for example, right?
Yeah.
So also rethinking how we've traditionally just done online research in a really ad hoc way and start to think about like how can we be thoughtful about the ethics process and what now technology is allowing us to integrate.
Okay, I have one more question.
Yes.
Is it okay? I'm sorry, everybody who I'm sure has questions. one, can I get your video person's like name for making all these videos you guys are making on YouTube?
I made
Y'all are
them.
You're making them?
And Josh is
You're
making
like a
them.
consultant, right? And then
It's a well, we can talk about it, but it's a platform that fourth graders use successfully.
Okay,
so I think you'll be fine.
I'll still need a consultant.
Yeah.
And then just one last little thing about scraping social media.
Mhm.
This has been another huge area of contention in our, well, not contention, but discussion in our IRB is even if somebody puts something out as public, they were not putting it out there for the purposes of being brought into research. And I'm just curious, as you think about these prowlers that can go out and just scrape social media, are you talking about that within the context of people who have already agreed to participate in research, or just general open posting and we're just pulling data down, even though that person hasn't actually consented to be a research participant?
So both, I think, actually. There's some really cool research that's being done by a scholar in the UK, actually, where she is tracking, so she's getting youth to agree to be tracked in their online activities, right? So they're using a study account to follow them, and they've consented to having their data collected. That is one way to do it. With publicly available data, I would usually go back to the online platform's terms of service, right? So does the online platform terms of service allow for that? And then legally around public statements, right? For Twitter, for example, it's a public forum, right? And if you look at the terms of service and it's put as public, right? If you don't have privacy settings, for example, that's public content. That's making public statement in digital space, right? So so I would go back to that kind of thing, the legal language around public statements as well as the terms of service of whatever platform you're interested in scraping data from. Thank you. Any other questions? Oh, we got one more.
No tenemos.
I think we have one more, and then I'll be here after.
So a quick question about cohort effects when it comes to designing these things. 'Cause as someone who doesn't have much maybe confidence in doing this, because Jeremy just asked, where'd you get the videos? And then you said it was something a fourth grader could do.
Yeah, they use them to have primary school kids do animation. Yeah.
How do you suggest people develop more confidence in doing this type of stuff and taking a little bit of risk?
Right. So come take my class at Ohio State on social work practice with technology. But I would say there is I'm doing my best. The literature actually is not great in this area. If people even they use techniques, they tend not to write about them. So I wrote an entire research note on using a video for ethics in online surveys, and online surveys generally. I would say I'm happy to consult, and there are other scholars who are similarly using technology and even things like VR and AI in different really interesting ways. But I think, and also SWR and CSWE and other conferences, there are now often tech tracks that are teaching about this stuff and how to do it. But there isn't a really great, there's not one really great resource yet I can point you to for something like that. Sorry.
No tenemos más tiempo para continuar. Ya como último punto, Dr. Shelley nos dará unas palabras para cerrar este simposio. Gracias, Lauren.
Well, I'm aware that we need to vacate this beautiful room very soon. So I will keep it short. I particularly want to thank Dr. McEnroy for an amazing, enlightening presentation and the snappiest responses of the day. Amazing. And I definitely want to thank Dr. Austin and Dr. Pons as